events that did that. It was a trigger event.
And it was so interesting because right when this happened, it was like the day 3 of the occupation. I thought it was done after this. I thought then people were going to be afraid to go out because people were getting pepper sprayed. And I cried on the subway platform. Wow. So I was like, fuck, this is over. Like, no one's going to show up. And then the next day at the park, there were, 2,000 people.
Wow.
We saw that a bunch of times too.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we didn't even manage the repression plan.
So, what's the difference between this way of framing actions and escalation to the structured tradition is that we're actually trying to create trigger events and moments of the whirlwind. And we're going to talk more about how to do that. But a lot of times, in the Birmingham model that was developed in the Civil Rights Movement was so much bigger than anything that we have seen in my organizing experience. When they started, they said, for us to win, we have to fill the jails with probably 2,000 to 10,000 people getting arrested. That is a big vision for an action, okay? And they realized that they couldn't do it with the organizational capacity that they had. So what they needed is they needed a big vision, they needed an escalation plan of how to get there, and they needed momentum that was going to take them through a few cycles to get there. And if you build it, they will come. Concert promotion, okay? Do you have the structures available to have a really, really big concert? No, you don't. But if you don't have a vision of a big-ass concert, no one's going to show up. You have to have a vision of your party before you can invite people to the party, right? And here, we're actually trying to create a big-ass party, okay? But you still need an escalation plan of how to get there, how to mobilize people there, and you still need momentum to actually get there, okay? But if you don't build it, they will not come. You have to have a vision of getting to trigger events and to moments of the whirlwind because we really believe that those are the things that are going to create popular movements.
Do trigger events and moments of the whirlwind just happen because people intentionally plan to make them happen, or do they happen by accident as well?
It's a combination. It's a combination. Moments of the whirlwind basically never happen unless trigger events are translated by a movement to create activity. But trigger events, a lot of times, if you listed most of the big events on your power graph, were trigger events. And I bet you a lot of us who don't have very active movements, most of the trigger events, some of them are not for us. Some of the trigger events actually polarize people in the opposite direction. September 11th was a big effing trigger event. And you could say it's almost a moment of the whirlwind for the right. I mean, they had lots of viral activity. I remember in the streets, people doing all these spontaneous patriotic parades and, doing these little actions of taking the flag and tying it to bridge signs or whatever, right? But that was all like uncoordinated, decentralized activity. All created through the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So that's a trigger event, but that's not one necessarily that we want to create, and it's hard for us to mobilize around as much as the right is. But even that, we can try to work with.
Would you say though, like if we're really honest, that the difference between a really good action and a trigger event is the fact of like receiving violence, like the fact of violence being done against the person?
We're going to talk about what makes good polarization next. That's the next section, okay? Which we're going to talk about what is the common phenomenon behind trigger events. And I think that's what a lot of people want to know. It's like, how do we create these? But first I want to just say, how different is it that in this tradition, from the get-go, you're going to have a grand strategy that the whole concept is that this is the primary mechanism. Small actions are important because it gets you around the cycle of momentum. It creates a little bit of movement, maybe, so that you can absorb it into your organization so it can build up. And maybe getting to a trigger event, you have to do a lot of small actions. That might be true. But the goal is to do trigger events, and the goal is to create a moment of the whirlwind.
Let's take, before we go into actions and tactics and talking about the secret sauce, let's talk to the person left and right and just, what are you getting from this last 30 minutes on the different kinds of actions? So let's talk for a second. Find somebody, find somebody. What is it?
Huh? Yeah.